Hello and welcome back to OCD Coded. I'm Erin Brown. I have OCD myself, and my hope with this is to help you learn to turn it into a superpower. I really need to come up with a new intro to that, so any feedback is welcome. But today we were going to be talking about OCD and empathy and how OCD is a processing disorder, and processing disorders, include a lot of different kinds of things, including ADD, ADHD, autism, bipolar, PTSD, then dyslexia and those kind of things. And so, but then it's just also thinking of it as just a processing disorder. And that one of my theories with all of this is that, OCD has struggles to process empathy. That's one of the things that it doesn't mean empathy is not there, as can be the case, or that some people try and say sometimes when they misunderstand it. But that the whole point is, how do we process empathy? And I think there's a lot of struggling with integrity too, like in a positive way, like that with people with processing disorders tend to have really high integrity, and what they struggle to do is to process that integrity, or like, okay, well, this is the right thing to do, or this is what these people or this society or this group says is the right thing to do. And then when they try and follow it, it can life is full of so many gray areas that it could be really difficult to be able to do that to the letter. And then also, people don't always know what they want, and we can't assume we know what they want. And even when we give people what they want, sometimes it ends up not being enough. And that struggling to process all of that can be such a big part of this. And so, one thing that I had heard the other day too that made me really think about how it affects OCD specifically was kind of this idea that with OCD particularly, it's like, oh, don't tell me that or don't show me that because then it gets stuck in my head and I just can't stop seeing it. And again, while that can happen to a lot of people with OCD, it is kind of more like an intrusive thought that just keeps on coming with it. And one thing I noticed with horror movies and that kind of thing too, and I remember from a very young age, what was that movie called? Um, the night. Anyway, but there was this part where, and so I guess this is a little thing, too. I'm going to be talking about some things that can be visually disturbing. So a little just warning there. If you want to not listen, go ahead. But I'm going to give some examples. But in this one, the knife like came to life and bit the person's hand while it was holding the knife. And I just remember I was like, I had to have been only like 7, and I walked into the room while the adults were watching it, and I wasn't supposed to be watching it. And then I just saw that, and then I could not. I had dreams about it for the longest time, and it was really hard to. And so, like, but one of the things with PTSD and with OCD is we can't avoid all the triggers. And so, how do we learn to process them differently, and why is that so hard for us to process? And part of it for me is, and that I wonder, and is my theory as I work with more clients about it, is again, like I felt like I was feeling that. Like I kept thinking about if I was that person holding that knife, how that would feel. And that's part of what empathy is feeling the person's pain. And then it usually ends up making the person feel responsible for that pain or responsible to fix it or just wanting to fix it because now I'm feeling their pain and I'm like, oh gosh, this feels terrible. Let me try and fix it. And and I've had, different people talk about things too, like with the horror movies where, grabbing a toothbrush and then going to brush your teeth and it being a razor blade, and then the person not being able to brush their teeth or having a really hard time and having to check again and again and again that their toothbrush is not a razor, and how just that really those kind of all of these are ways that we tend, or at least that's my thought. And again, I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about all of that and how you feel about it. If you think that's true or if you have your own theories. But that, again, it's like I keep putting myself in that position and thinking what it would feel like to do that and how terrible that would feel. And that powerless feeling is such a big piece of it. And as the quick refresher or reminder about with OCD is mostly about fear of the unknown, whatever that unknown is, whatever my OCD is attached to. And then it's fear that the unknown will happen, and I obsess about that fear. And then the compulsion is anything I do to reduce the distress of the unknown. And so with this fear, like with empathy, it's like, that powerless feeling, I think, is a big piece of it, is of feeling like, oh my gosh, bad things happen to good people. Or even if I'm trying my best, sometimes things can go wrong. And how does that what does that mean and how can I try and prevent it? And there's so much preemptive trying to like prevent things from happening or even preemptively grieve something before it happens because I'm so afraid it'll be so sad. And how all these ways we can get stuck in that, but that just really wondering, as it is with the practice of how to just practice responding differently to those fears and how do I respond differently to empathy even. And it doesn't mean um different ways of like it can be any way you want to respond to empathy. There's not just one way to respond to it. And how do we practice and how do I kind of externalize it? And that makes it where when I think about the difference between empathy and compassion, and this has been in some of the previous videos and everything too, but just it really helps me to remind myself this, especially if I'm struggling to process it, that it's, empathy is that feeling someone's pain and usually feeling responsible for it, where compassion is I can like care about someone's pain without feeling it and how much of a difference that is and how much as a therapist, I have to learn to keep those emotional boundaries, to be able like I can care about people's pain and I want to help them with it, but I also can't take it on as my own or feel that pain and then feel, responsible for fixing it and that people aren't broken, that people aren't problems to be fixed and that my life goes better when I assume everyone's doing the best they can. And um, that doesn't mean I agree with what everyone does and but how and then that's the kind of thing too. How do we um like be able to set boundaries with other people, but still hold that idea in our heads too and be able to interact with different people. How do I have relationships with people that I agree with? And how can I process that morality and empathy differently in these kind of ways where I can't always tiptoe around or be afraid of what someone else might think or feel or be offended by, but then I also don't want to intentionally walk around doing those things. But that also, my goal would be to create an environment where it would be okay to talk about it, where it could be that whole, oh, this thing hurt my feelings, or how could, we do with that next time differently? Or how do we talk about this in a different way? And, but just not from that victim or drama triangle. That was again in another earlier video. But that, like, it's not the, oh, you hurt my feelings and you owe me an apology, or like you're wrong, I'm right kind of idea, but just more of like, hey, this thing happened. Can we talk about it? And how much more productive that would be. Um, and and so it is. And so I'm trying to gear up with all of those things. As part of it is I am starting to write my first book also. And so I'm needing so that's part of the reason for some of the break between videos. And I apologize for that. And I would love some just any ideas you guys have about future videos or things to cover and different ways. But I really hope to just be some hope in this world or some um, transformation that, evolution of our inner selves and how we, can shine our light in this world. So have a good one. Until next time, see you then.